A beloved martial arts teacher has been murdered, and a rival school might be to blame. The bad guys are in for a rude awakening though, because Bruce Lee's character in this movie is truly unhinged, and nothing's going to stop him. This is Fist of Fury. Welcome everyone to the Collector's Cut. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
This time you're reading paper. Next time, it's glass.
This is a movie podcast, and we are working through Bruce Lee season. This is episode 2 of the season. Last time we did, of course, The Big Boss. This week we tackle Fist of Fury, which came out in 1972. And Bruce Lee plays the complete opposite of the character he played in the last movie. Last movie, he was like, no, I must be a pacifist, until he's pushed so far that he can't not fight. This movie, he wants to kick everyone's head off the second he shows up.
I mean, you say that, but I feel like even last movie, there was this internal rage. The difference is this time, he doesn't try to stop it.
It's complete 180 in terms of character compared to the last movie we talked about, which is funny because there's actually a lot of other faces from the last movie that pop up in this one. The cousin character is in the martial arts school that he's visiting. The love interest from the last movie is the love interest in this movie. The villain from the last movie plays a minor character in this one. Like, there was a lot of faces popping up, and there was probably more that I didn't notice, but those were the more notable ones that I was recognizing from the last one. So, just worth mentioning. But as always, everyone, we will start spoiler free, and we will warn you before we get into the spoilers. And if you're enjoying the show on YouTube, please do hit the like button; it helps us out a bunch. And if you want to support the show and get some bonus shows that we do over on Patreon, and go over there, you can do that. But I will tell you more about that at the end of the episode. So, the basic premise of Fist of Fury is basically just the leader, the teacher, the head teacher of a martial arts school in Shanghai dies. And it seems to be natural, but Bruce Lee's not so convinced. And Bruce Lee comes back to the school at the start of the movie. I mean, because this all happens before the movie starts. Like, he's already dead. Mm-hmm. The movie starts with Bruce Lee showing up and being like, "No, master!" And
the version I had a little like prologue statement at the beginning that said like, "This was actually a real dude who like died." Yeah, he's like, "Oh, this is actually a real dude," and like no one knows quite how he dies, but we think this is the most plausible explanation.
Yeah, we can get to that, David.
Well, no, I thought it was funny the fact that all of this stuff that happened, the film goes out of its way to say like, we think this is pretty reasonable. This seems right to us.
I mean, was he even really a real dude, or was this just a movie try to sound?
I would assume so. I will say there's nothing in this movie that gives it a time period, but apparently, according to Wikipedia, this is like 1901. This is just barely turn of the century.
Interesting. Because there are cars around, which I guess, there was cars then, but... I don't know. I wasn't getting 1901 vibes necessarily, but then that could just be a case of I don't know what Shanghai was like in 1901. So
that's fair.
Maybe it's that. Anyway, I was trying to give the private statement. Shut up, right?
Apologies. Sorry.
Jesus, I am so sleep deprived. I'm not in the mood. Okay, I'm not in the mood.
Everyone, watch out. Pete's gonna unleash his own Fist of Fury on me.
Yes, I'm in a Fist of Fury mood, frankly. Right? So yes, Bruce Lee shows up, he's upset about the death of his master, and he's convinced that something's afoot here, right? Someone's done this is not an accident, someone killed him, and he very, quickly suspects, technically they kind of piss him off in a different way, but it's quite obvious that clearly this rival dojo, this Japanese dojo that's in the city's probably got something to do with it, and he is out for revenge. That is the plot. That is it. And honestly, other than telling you how it ends, there's probably not a whole lot to spoil. It's a very straightforward movie as far as the premise is concerned. But that is the gist. So, yes, David, what did you think of Fist of Fury?
I liked it. But I don't know. I think there's something in the pacing. I don't know. I kind of just need to talk through it to figure out my exact issues with it. But I like the premise of it. The premise of it is really good for me, and I think the fight scenes, the choreography, they all work out very well. But I think that there's something going on with I don't want to say motivation, but like the B plot, more or less, of this movie is kind of just stagnant and feels like it's being cut to for no real reason. Obviously, there is a tie-in for it, but because of how much time it takes up in this movie, it just really felt like it was dragging to me. And for a movie that has as many fight scenes as it does, they're all mainly just Bruce Lee. Like, yes, there's one or two sequences that involve everyone else at this dojo, but for the most part, whenever we cut back over to that, especially later in the movie, it just feels like we're wasting time. So by the time we hit the end of it, especially as we got towards the very end, I just kind of was like, okay, yes, we're done. Please just wrap it up now. It felt like it was kind of dragging there for me. And I would say that feeling began like halfway through the movie as well. So it wasn't just brief there at the end. But like I said, choreography, all that stuff is good. It's just a pacing issue for me that kind of let me down a little bit there.
Yeah, this is a weird one because I think I mostly had a good time. I had a fun time, and most of the reasons why I was having fun were intentional, although there's a couple of little things that were actually unintentionally fun. But the thing for me is that this feels the opposite to The Big Boss in a lot of ways. I mentioned the main thing being, of course, Bruce Lee's character feeling like here he's a hothead who's ready to just start punching people immediately, and does so very much quite quickly, and has scenes where he's taken on very large groups of people on his own, and he's doing it in a very different way. In the last movie, it was like, okay, he's been pushed to this point where he's fighting in defense because these bad people are doing bad things. In this movie, he's the one instigating everything almost every time he starts a fight. And, well, you're kind of on his side to an extent. There's definitely a sort of feeling of, yeah, he's like, there has to be consequences for this. And I mean, that's the thing that honestly connects the two movies to me in my head, is that they both don't shy away from the fact that there's consequences for what violence takes place. So it is true that we can only rid the world of, violence through the absence of it.
The eradication of violence, yeah.
Yes. Anyway, so like the fight scene's a lot of fun. I think the dub on this one, because I only had the dub as an option, was a lot more comical to me. There's a character who's like the I kept thinking of as the lawyer. I think they say he's the interpreter, but like he's got a bit of a lawyery vibe to him.
Yeah, he's a sleazeball.
The dub version of his voice in this movie is like this comical, whiny, nasally, like, yes, I work for my master, yes, and you all are just, it's like he's comically that sort of cartoony voice. And the voice for Bruce Lee actually in this movie was very different as well, and it had kind of a...
Was it not him dubbing himself?
No, I was actually wrong about that in the last one, which, if I remember correctly, I'll have edited that out. I'm admitting that I made the mistake here, but just so I don't get 10 comments saying, what are you talking about, you're wrong.
No, Pete, rage bait. You gotta let it happen.
No, apparently, so there was actually... They weren't happy with the dub on the first movie, but I don't think they were not happy with the dub that we watched. I think they were unhappy with the original dub.
Okay.
Because the one that we watched that has the different music, because I was on the dub wiki. There's a dubbed wiki. Just for anyone.
I'm sure there's a wiki for everything. Yeah.
But basically, there was like Bruce Lee and like the company weren't happy with how it turned out, the original one, and then there was a later one that America did, which I think is the one that we based on what I read. Here they got more involved with the dub and did it themselves. Not the voices themselves, but Bruce Lee like directed the guy who was doing the voice for him. But honestly, like I found the dubbing here a bit more cartoony to me, which was an interesting, because the dubbing mixed with the type of writing that the characters have, and like the romance subplot and whatever else, it kind of had this weird thing where the martial arts feels kind of ahead of its time in some ways, despite the fact that it's got the cartoony, like, blood for paint and all that. Or paint for blood. The thing that stuck out to me, though, is that the way that the characters are written and the dialogue is written, and again, some of this might be the dub rather than the original dialogue, but that felt a lot more like behind the times to me. Because when I think of the 1970s, when it comes to movies, that's the era where things were getting more gritty and realistic in the US movies. That's where things were starting to become a bit more natural and realistic in a lot of ways. And this doesn't feel like that. This feels like, this feels like a 40s or 50s written movie, but with the fight scenes of a movie way ahead of its time. So it's an interesting mix in terms of tone there, which kind of works in some places. But yeah, the other things that feel opposite, though, is the fact that the last movie had a much, much lower budget. This clearly has a much bigger budget. There's much bigger, lavish sets that they've clearly all designed. There's some like obvious outdoor sets that have got backdrops and things like that. But the weird thing is that because they're not shooting in real locations and it's like 70s movie sets, they look notably more fake. So there's this weird thing where I can feel more money on the screen, but it doesn't necessarily look better than what the last movie had. It's like a weird like push and pull of resources and production value. So it'll be fun to rate that at the end of the show. But overall, I had a good time. There's definitely some fun things. There's definitely some weird things. And I kind of found some of the main character progression a little bit funny. And I don't think it was necessarily meant to be funny, but I found it funny. Which is basically, I mean, without spoiling anything, I'll just say that Bruce Lee's basically a serial killer in this. And we'll talk about that later. But
yeah, I
said we'll talk about it later, David.
No, that's fine. That's fair. But like, I really do like Bruce Lee's character in this. But I get what you're saying.
He's entertaining.
That it's kind of funny. Yeah, because there's long sequences in this movie where he like has disguises, like, and not just like, oh, he throws on like a hat or something, a baseball cap and a jacket or whatever. Like, no, he goes like full on wigs and stuff at times, and like facial hair in order to disguise himself, just to like overhear what the people are doing. There is a comedic aspect to it, but at the same time, if you really look at the actions his character provides outside of those moments, he is absolutely a serial killer. He has absolutely gone completely mad by the death of his sensei.
Yeah, he's basically gone like full John Wick in a lot of ways, in terms of like his inciting incident and like his thirst for vengeance. But he's doing this Inspector Clouseau style, dressing up his characters to like gain access to places and like to trick people and whatnot. He has at least 3 or 4 disguises over the course of the middle of this movie, and it became like a character trait that he disguises to do things. And I'm like, I was not expecting this. But at the same time, there's like some fancy, fight scenes and choreography and all that. There's a couple of like fun but kind of hilarious moments where like they'll sub in a person for a dummy because they're going to get thrown across the room or something like that. Yeah. You can it's a quick cut, but you can see it's a dummy that he's throwing, and there's some charm to that as well. So I feel like the fight scenes are better than this than Big Boss.
Yeah. The fight scenes have a more realistic component to it. The fight scenes feel like they are all actually done with the fight choreography in mind, and not so much of like editing trickery to make them look, like jumping 10 feet in the air or like doing anything that's completely outlandish. And there are things that are outlandish in these fight scenes, particularly, you get Bruce Lee literally just punching a guy in the chest and he just, I guess all of his internal organs just explode simultaneously based off of the reactions that you get. But because the rest of the fight scenes are so much more toned down relatively, it makes those moments pop more as more brutal than the other scenes where it felt more fantastical over in Big Boss.
Yeah, and then the other thing here I would say about the fight scenes is that this is where Bruce Lee, and I don't know if he does this in all the movies after this, but this is where he's doing his more signature, like after he like throws a big punch, he'll sort of like pose and like have a scream face kind of thing where it'll be like,
Was he doing like the high-pitched scream in your dub? Because just for everyone awareness, I watched the original Cantonese version, so I had a different version than Pete here. But did he do like his high-pitched like yelling every time he threw punches in yours?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know for sure if it's the exact same yell as you got, but I mean, yeah, there was a yell, yes.
Okay, fair enough. It was just every time that he was going around, it was like he'd throw a punch, he'd just be like a whah sort of noise.
Yeah. It's basically the sort of thing that if anyone was making fun of a kung fu movie, there's just the noises they would be making. But no, he was straight up doing that, and he was doing all these like sort of posing moments after a punch or after a kick. And it's the sort of thing where, okay, it's kind of cheesy in some ways, but at the same time, he's got so much charisma that it's actually very entertaining to watch him do it. I guess it's different when someone's making fun of him and does it versus him when he can actually kick that quickly, and it's so dangerous. You're like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to let him make his face and noise because, yeah, he'll beat me up.
Also, it does just kind of add a little bit to that like mental instability that he's got going on here, where you're just like, no, this guy is just crazy enough that he will kill me.
I guess that's what it boils down to. In the last movie, he was a hero. There were still consequences for him finally taking out a bunch of bad guys, but he was ultimately a heroic, sympathetic figure. Here, while you can sympathize with his motivation, he's a little bit of a psycho, right? This is a story about an unstable man who might have a good cause, but he's a wrecking ball.
It strikes me, I mean, obviously this is not the way that I think it was meant to be portrayed, but just because of how quick he was to jump onto the casket after his teacher died, like, it struck me that this teacher was kind of running a little bit of like a militant cult sort of thing going on, and this guy is the 100% archetype to buy into the cult. Like, he's that level of crazy, and so when his god figure ends up dying, he just breaks, essentially.
Yeah, to be fair though, everything we hear about what this guy was teaching everyone was like, hey, don't fight unless you're, have to. Like that. They all have that attitude except Bruce Lee, who's ready to start kicking heads off.
And that's the part that I'm like, I feel like he got into this not because of like, oh, I respected the teacher and his teaching so well. It's like, no, I wanted to kill people with my hands.
Yeah, that's scene number 2, by the way, that they've just referenced as the jumping on the coffin. Yeah, I mean, other than that, like, the plot is actually relatively thin, right? It's actually fairly straightforward. This could end up being a fairly quick review because I don't actually know how much there is to talk. Because so much of the runtime is made up of fight scenes, and the fight scenes, there's a couple of highlights we'll point out, but for the most part, we're not going to sit and recount every move that he makes. So,
and then alternatively to that, I don't know if you were feeling the same way, but in between the fight scenes, it feels like it's just going to this B plot about like the fate of the school, and that feels like it stagnates for so long in the back end for me.
Yeah, kinda. I mean, it's kind of meant to be the ticking time bomb because this school's under threat based on everything else that's going on, and I think that's what they're going for. I kind of agree that it feels a little bit. Yeah, like there's that, because that was like, I mean, to be honest, it wasn't even the school that I had a problem with. It was more just the sense that when it became time for, okay, third act, he's going to go after the main bad guy kind of part of the plot, I kind of felt like we didn't really crescendo to it. It just kind of felt like it was happening because, oh, it's that time in the runtime for him to go do that. Not because, like, something else happened that provoked him to take, because the whole idea typically is that, oh, maybe he is finally going to stop what he's doing, but then the bad guys do one last nasty thing that make him turn around and go, no, I'm taking this asshole down. Like, that's what I was expecting, and instead he just kind of goes and does the third act because it's time to go do the third act.
Yeah, he just bolts his way into the building. It's just like, all right, anybody who's not part of this fight, leave. And then the fight just happens.
Yeah, yeah.
If we're kind of moving on a little bit, there is one thing I want to bring up just about the content of this movie, and that is the very, very heavy leaning on the race relations between the Chinese and the Japanese at this period of time, to the point where I don't want to say that the Japanese came off as like stereotypes, but like that one business guy kind of felt like it was leaning a bit too hard on a few like Japanese racial stereotypes, like stuff you would see during like the World War II propaganda posters and stuff like that.
Yeah, it was something I thought about as soon as they introduced that the villains were Japanese, and immediately they come in and they're very comically villainous, and I was laughing because you've got like the interpreter businessman guy who is like super comically like this whiny voice, like he's kind of like the evil lawyer type character. And then you've got the like two of the sort of henchman figures that come with them, and they have like the weirdest wigs on I can possibly describe.
I'm not sure how to say the blonde one, but the brunette was absolutely the mullet from Joe Dirt. Like, that was it. It was spot on.
They have very distinct hair. You never forget, like, or not recognize these two when they pop up later. Not that they have like big plots around them, but just when they're in a fight in a group, you can always pinpoint them out because their hair sticks out. But as soon as they walked in, I sort of went, this is interesting. Like, because I was thinking, is this like when a lot of US movies would have, Russians be the villains during like the 70s and 80s kind of thing? Right. Is this just like at the time when this was made, there was enough of like oh no, we can make Japan the villains of China, because that's how people felt at the time, or
right.
Or if they're doing like a period piece thing here, maybe they're saying, oh, this makes sense historically at this time period. But it's kind of weird because like they're just so comically villainous in this movie. Like there's no depth to them. They're just really, really bad people. So it feels a little bit weird in that sense.
Like if they just said, oh, we're a rival dojo or we're something else going on, that'd be one thing. But like there's an entire sequence early on in this movie that makes repeated and constant comparisons of the Chinese citizens of Shanghai to dogs, and then shows how dogs are treated better even. Like it's very heavily leaning on these race relations, but it doesn't feel like that is something that is necessary for the plot. It's just something there to make the world a bit more against our school. Like that's the only thing I can really place it as, is they're not going to be able to fall back on the good graces of society to help them out.
It didn't feel like it didn't feel the movie had anything to really say about it. I guess is what I'd agree with. Like it doesn't feel like it's making some big point and the plot kind of feeds into it in some way. It's heavy, particularly early on, I would say, and there's some sprinklings of it later, but it's yeah. I don't know. For me, I just sort of thought, oh, I wonder if this is like a super uncomfortable thing, particularly if you're Chinese or Japanese watching this now, because of the way it's been. Particularly like, does a more progressive modern Chinese audience watch this and go, oh, this is a bit cringe that they like this is how they talked about Japanese being the obvious villains in this kind of thing.
I will say I read that the Japanese release was edited slightly. I don't know what was cut out, but it was for the quote unquote negative depictions. So
fair. The one useful thing about all the rival clan being Japanese is that all of the characters, whenever we got into like a bunch of like a big group fight of some kind, is that because all the Chinese like martial artists are all dressed in like the sort of the one with the ties going down the middle, and then all the Japanese characters have the baggy kind of I don't want to say samurai outfit, but the
Bushido stuff, samurai gear.
Like they're very easily coded with their like a dress code each, so it's like it was very easy to like know who was on which side at all times. So that was one silver lining from the premise in that point of view. But
I'm trying to figure out what the name of the Chinese one is, but all I'm getting is Kung Fu Wushu clothes. It's not giving me like a name of it.
I actually did Kung Fu for a little bit when I was like 11, 12, 13, and I had one of those tops because that's what you wore.
I mean, here's the thing. I did some other type. I think it was like a Korean martial art when I was young. Didn't have that, but if I had the type you're talking about, I would not be able to resist wearing it like Bruce Lee wore it, with the chest open just all the time. He looks so badass.
That's fair. Yes, Bruce Lee likes to, because he basically does that thing a wrestler does where he pulls down the straps like halfway through a match to show that things are heating up. He takes his jacket off and gets topless. He's like, okay, now it's time to be Phil Bruce Lee and start kicking faces and taking names.
And this is also, I mean, obviously he's had a history, but this is the first time that we're seeing his nunchuck skills as well.
Yes, he whips out the nunchucks at one point in this movie, so that's something to talk about a little bit later. As far as anything else goes, I wouldn't say that I felt the music stuck out to me in any particular way in this one.
No, I again, there might be a difference in the dubbing, but I agree. I don't think there was anything that really jumped out in terms of really interesting score or anything like that. It just felt very there was a very early on there was a strong, I would say, heroic theme, but ultimately it was just kind of used during every fight scene, so it didn't really pop out at any moment as like, oh, here's that big cool song.
I will say when I was looking up the dub wiki, I did notice it specifically pointed out that the second dub that they did for Big Boss changed the music, and they didn't specifically say anything like that for this, so I'm assuming that all the other parts of the soundtrack are probably the same. It's just the dialogue that's different. Again, could be wrong, but like that would be my assumption based on that. So, Yeah, I mean, as far as anything else goes, I think some of the cinematography is fun. You know, there's a couple of great like zoom in close up to the eyes as Bruce Lee's getting ready to take on a bunch of people. I do think there's some fun set pieces with how he starts fights. They kind of leveled up because I remember a Big Boss started with that one JPEG of Bruce Lee kicking that they kept just using over and over again. The opening of this felt like, oh, you've leveled up a little bit. You're not just using one JPEG anymore. You got a half dozen of them.
I wonder if you got slightly different than the one I got then, because I mean, I don't remember there being a bunch of JPEGs.
Oh, maybe it was there. There was definitely JPEGs at some point. I definitely remember there being like some, like, I think when his name comes up, there's a...
Yeah, there were a few at the very beginning, and then most of the credits, though, on mine were just like different Chinese calligraphy texts on screen as they were listing through the names.
Yeah, I think it was in mine too. But even in that little moment, they still had more images than the last movie did.
Oh, yeah. They have 2 full movies worth now. In fact, I'm pretty sure one of them is not in this movie. So they did just pull production stills from something else entirely and put it in this.
That's... whatever, that's fair.
Yeah.
It's still Bruce Lee, it's not false advertising.
One other thing, if we're getting close to moving on, I just wanted to bring up with the naming convention of this movie. So I brought up last time that when Big Boss was brought over to America, something happened, I don't know what, and they ended up calling that movie Fists of Fury upon the initial release, plural. This one, when it was originally released, was called The Chinese Connection.
Okay. So
you might have a copy of this and know it is Chinese Connection if you were an older member of the audience, but that is the original way that it was released. And it's even on some posters if you do a search for this movie in Google Images.
Sure. Yeah, I can see it in IMDb, actually, now you've mentioned it. I suspect it's not been called that, though, since at least the VHS days.
Yeah, probably not.
Sounds like something that had been cleared up by the time we got to the DVD era. But, yeah, okay, that's interesting. Yeah, okay, I think we'll get into spoilers then, and we'll talk about some of the different things that happen in here and how they handle certain moments. So, spoilers for Fist of Fury, you have been warned. So, I mean, yeah, like we sort of said, it starts with like a weird bit of text saying, hey, this was a real person that died, and no one knows for sure how he died, but this is the most popular theory. Then the movie plays, and I'm like, really? This is the popular theory?
Yeah, absolutely. This is the whole theory that it was based off of trying to save this school. By the way, is this not, to some extent, like the school plot? Isn't that a Karate Kid movie? Isn't that like Karate Kid 2 or something? Where it's like you got to save the school because the rival school's getting upset with it?
I'm pretty sure no.
No? All right. It just really reminded me of when they was talking about like the dojo going under. I'm like, this seems very familiar to me.
I mean, it was only the villains that had a dojo in Karate Kid, and it was definitely, if there was a plot about them going under, it definitely would have been 2, because 2 is the one where they go to Japan. Right.
That's why I was thinking it was that one, yeah. Oh well.
Unless there's a dojo in Japan that I don't remember, but...
Yeah, it's been so long since I've seen Karate Kid 2.
Oh yeah.
I just know it's not the first one.
I just remember 2 being really boring, and I haven't watched it since I was a kid, so...
That explains it.
But yeah, I mean, if there was a dojo plot in that, then I apologize, but I don't recall such a thing. I only remember the dojo the villains were a part of, and how they want to murder a teenager in the third one.
Yeah, Cobra Kai, absolutely.
Yes, Cobra Kai, that's the one. So... the movie starts with Bruce Lee arriving in the rain, and it's clearly a set and a sound stage. It just has that look to it. It's the same with where the coffin is, like the grave site, is that it's got that like, oh, this is a sky backdrop, and you've got like one sort of bit of land surrounded by some like fake bushes and whatnot. So you can sort of see the limits of what it's doing. But at the same time, it does feel bigger budget than the last movie, because the last movie could have never built sets like this. So... And it also feels a lot more colourful. There's a lot of colour in the set design immediately, I thought. Lots of blues and reds.
Yeah.
Things like that.
They really try to make it pop wherever they can. And also, just costuming-wise, everyone else is seemingly wearing a black getup or, a more muted color, whereas Bruce Lee is the only one who's wearing a completely all-white suit, so he's always popping out wherever he is.
Yeah. Yeah, and obviously he finds out, he's like, he's too late, damn it, I'm too late, where's the funeral? And then refuses to accept that this man is dead, so he starts like throwing the dirt off the coffin. He's like, no, I'm not ready, and to the point where like the guy who's running the place now has to hit him with a shovel to knock him out.
Yep. If only the main villain spotted that somewhere along the way. Hit him with a shovel, because clearly that's the only thing that will stop him. They
never tried a shovel. No.
Nope.
I mean, he was caught off guard. He was too distraught to properly fight back, of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, the real start of the movie, though, is they're having like a, the wake or whatever, and they're doing like a speech and talking about him. They've got a big portrait of the old master up. By the way, in the dub, they kept referring to this place as a boxing school, when it is clearly not boxing. Did the original subtitles have that as well?
They occasionally said boxing. They mostly just called it school. Like every once in a while they threw out the term boxing. I think this is basically just the equivalent of we haven't invented MMA yet, so it's just boxing by default.
Okay. Interesting either way, but so just to show how dastardly the villains are in this movie, the evil slime ball, right? I'm just going to call him the lawyer. That's not what they called him, but I'm just going to say lawyer.
I think it's like Wu is his name.
Oh, his name, yeah. But yeah, I think the exact thing, his job description was he's the interpreter. But yes. I'm just going to call him the lawyer because that's what he makes me think of. And he comes in, he's all slimy, he's got his two henchmen with him, and he walks up and says, "Hey, I've got a gift for you all from our dojo." And they unwrap, and it's just some text, and they're like, "Wait, you're I think it's like you're a sick man or something like that, or you're all sick men."
It was sick man of East Asia, which is apparently a phrase that existed outside of this movie to basically insult Chinese people.
Sure, which they do explain, but obviously they read it and like, what is this? And the lawyer explains it. It basically says, it means you're all lesser men, and you're not as good as us, and we're not scared because none of you could fight us anyway. So, that's fine. And the entire time Bruce Lee's standing there, and he's like the fists are getting clenched,
drinking its fury ready to happen,
and he's ready to come in, and one person sort of holds him back when he first wants to step in and start fighting. And this is basically just like 5 minutes almost of just this slime ball trying to make them all start fighting and make them lose their shit, and they're all just keeping their cool. It's like everyone in this room except Bruce Lee is Bruce Lee in the last movie, but Bruce Lee is like, oh, I'm ready to rip this guy's head off.
The lawyer basically steps up and he's like, "Hey, who will fight to defend the honor of your school? Anyone?" And then like the guy who's taken up the mantle after the teacher steps up and he's like, we only fight in order to like protect others. Like we don't fight for the sake of it. And then it cuts over to Bruce Lee and he's just like, "I swear to God, I'm gonna rip his head off."
So yeah, and they eventually they walk out, and it's a whole thing. And it's like, hey, we have to do something. They're just going to keep doing stuff or whatever. And the cam heads are all prevailing. They're like, no, we can't stoop to that level. We have to follow our master's teachings, blah, blah, blah. So what does Bruce Lee do? Bruce Lee just ignores them. And we get a big extended sequence right after this, pretty much, where he just goes to the dojo. The lawyer guy's not there, but like the two henchmen are there, and there's like a class going on, and they're all in the white karate style outfits with the belts, and they're doing some sparring and practicing whatever. And Bruce Lee just kind of walks in on his own, and he's holding the thing they gave him, the sign,
the text, yeah,
and he sort of sits it down or whatever, and he's sort of like just basically like waiting for someone to come and like kick this off, right? Yeah. And one of the bad wig henchmen comes over, and he makes such quick work of him. And this scene is basically just once everyone starts getting involved, Bruce Lee just takes every one of these guys out and embarrasses them all. Some of the highlights include when he picks up two of them in his hands, or when he's swinging them around and they turn into dummies, and he throws them off to the sides of the room. Yeah. Of course, he gets the nunchucks at one point, and he's like swinging those around, and he's hitting people in the face. The one time there's blood in this scene is because he hits a guy right on top of the head with the nunchucks, and we get the red paint coming out. But yeah, maybe my favorite bit is the ending though, where he kind of does this thing where he's kind of like going around all their feet and hitting them with the nunchucks. So when at the end of the fight, when he stands up, like half dozen or so guys that were still standing of the bad guys all just kind of like fall to the ground and start like rubbing their feet because they're all in pain.
Yeah, on one hand, like, it's in every kung fu movie, and that's just kind of the fun of it. You just enjoy seeing people get beat up like that. But like in this particular instance, where these are all trained people, it is kind of weird that everyone just stops fighting and just starts rubbing their feet. They're like, "Ow, that kind of hurt. I don't feel like I want to continue this anymore. My foot's a little sore now."
Yeah, so obviously Bruce Lee went through all these guys, and of course ends the scene with making the two bad wig henchmen eat.
Don't forget, he also takes on the sensei, like the guy who's teaching the class. Course, yes. It's his own like separate fight. They learn their level from Big Boss, where they're like, you gotta have the big guy at the end that you go up against.
Yeah, and Bruce Lee, of course, like, he puts up a bit more of a fight, but Bruce Lee still makes pretty short work of him and kind of embarrasses him in front of all of his students. And he's obviously not the main bad guy, but yes, he's the head. He's the mini boss of this part of the movie. And then he makes the two henchmen with the bad haircuts eat the sign they gave him. He smashes it up, rips out the bit of paper, rips it in half, and that's where your quote from the start came from, which is, "This time you're eating paper, next time it'll be glass."
Yep. I do like the actual, like, he took the metaphor of, "I'm going to make you eat those words," and made it literal.
Yes.
Like, he literally tore up the paper and said, "All right, now it's your guys. Take it." And he specifically picks out the two as well. Like, everyone else is sitting in the room. He points to them and tells them, "Get over here," and then embarrasses them in front of the class. It's at this point, he doesn't seem crazy yet. He seems pissed off, but he doesn't seem crazy.
Yeah, I think the turning point for where, he's maybe a psychopath, and we'll get to like why he does this in a little bit, but when he's killed two people and hangs them up on display, like from like lampposts or whatever it is, and I'm like, okay, you're hanging up dead bodies as a message, right? You're a little bit unhinged. We've crossed over the event horizon here with you, and that's where we are at. But that comes up in a little bit. One of those guys was the two guys that he kills in the kitchen. That's the kitchen. One of them was the villain from the first movie, just in case you didn't recognize him with the facial hair.
You're right. Okay, yeah. Fair enough. There was a lot of carryover between those movies. I wonder how close together they were filmed.
Oh, very. I mean, that was 71 that came out, and this is 72. And the next movie's also 72. So, yeah, they were these were coming out pretty quick. And this one, the last one, was the same director as well. So, not surprising. There's a lot of shared actors and whatnot between them. But, I mean, this is a fun sequence. And I think what impressed me about this is just... It was almost felt too quick to get to this level of a fight scene. I was like, you have to build to this a little bit. Like, what you got for the rest of the movie if we're doing this big bit now? But it is a solid, like, 5+ minute sequence, maybe even 10 minutes. I don't know. I'd have to go back and time it. But of this big fight happening from when he enters that room to when he finally leaves after making them eat the paper. Like, this big, long sequence full of fighting, full of Bruce Lee, full of charisma, doing all of his noises and his poses after each kick and whatnot. Really good stuff. Like, just simple little things, like when he like kicks someone in the front and he walks like past them, but then kicks them again, like behind them, but without turning around. He just sort of like kicks them in the back of his foot. Just these little effortless kind of moments that he puts in. Yeah,
every once in a while he'll do the thing where like two guys are coming up on either side of his shoulder. He just puts up both fists and they're out for the count. It's effortless and yet also badass.
Yeah, he's ducking a lot of hits as well, of course, because there's a whole group of them.
I will say something interesting. I noticed this happen once or twice in Big Boss, not enough to make a deal of it. It happened a few times here. They don't have the, I guess, comedic association with a nut shot. Like, they take it as a viable strategy and they use it.
It is a viable strategy, and you should use it.
Absolutely. But like, I feel like any sort of Western thing, you hit someone in the nuts, that's like, you got to pause for that and be like, oh, ho, ho, so silly. This one, it's like, nah, man, he's on the ground now. It worked. No,
I think in this movie, it's if you hit a shin, that's funny, because it would hurt a lot, but the fact that all these tough people have to like rub their shins, because like,
they're just hopping around on one foot, right?
Yeah, that's comedy. So, in retaliation for this, so because we finally see like, the big boss man of the Japanese dojo who's not there. He's got like an office that's sort of separate from all this. we see him get the news that someone from the Chinese school showed up and beat up everyone that was there, and he's like, well, we can't let this stand, we have to retaliate. So
I like he specifically calls out the lawyer too. He's like, I thought you said they were not like pushovers. What the hell is this guy doing messing up all of our guys?
Yeah, someone who's like a better fighter than like everyone we have, and not even just a better than everyone. It'd be one thing if he's better than one-on-one with everyone they have. He walked into a room and beat up all of them at the same time.
Yeah.
So, you know, right? So when Bruce Lee's not around, the retaliation happens where they show up with their little army of fighters and storm through the garden where all the characters at the Chinese school are, and they're all practicing doing various things. There's a couple of female characters, one of which is played by the same actress who was the love interest in the last movie. And that's the thing, like, they don't even like pull punches there. Like when the Japanese characters show up and they start picking a fight, the women fighters on the Chinese side just immediately start like throwing punches, and we see them get punched back and whatnot. So they're just like, they're in the mix without even thinking about it.
Equal opportunity. They don't have a gendered section here.
Yeah. And you know, when they get inside, they smash up some paintings and, you know, rip some couches or whatever. Basically just sending a message of like, hey, you sent someone to us, so we've came to mess up your place. And they're all like, what are you talking about? What is going on? And then when Bruce Lee shows up, they're like, Chen.
It's any other movie, you could have it almost as like a little comedic beat where he walks in, it's like, oh, did I do that?
That's exactly the voice the lawyer had.
Yeah. That's Steve Urkel from Family Man.
Yeah, he's got Urkel. He's got the Urkel voice.
One thing I did want to mention about this fight scene, it is not notable. They don't bring any attention to him, but one of the Japanese men attacking the school is being played by Jackie Chan. As like a stuntman there.
That does not surprise me. I think he also has like a very, very tiny role at that in Enter the Dragon as well, I want to say. In his early days before obviously he was famous himself. So that's cool. That's neat.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's sort of a progressive scene, and I was like, okay, do I like about this? I like that immediately this is continuing the theme from Big Boss, because Big Boss ended and we were like, hey, it's kind of impressive that they had this sense of consequence for what happened, even if we were on his side. And immediately, Bruce Lee was a hothead. He went to the other place. He beat them all up. And it was a fun sequence. And you feel like, yeah, okay, I'm kind of on his side for this. But this retaliation's all on him. Like, he escalated this. And he's caused all this. And all of his like friends and people that are training here, they're all hurt. And this is something that has to eat at him. Yeah. And, you know, like the bad guys, they want him. They specifically want to get to him. And it becomes this thing of like, look, the only options we really have are give you over to them, or, you know, they shut down the school because they've got the political sway to do that.
Right.
Which is the whole thing. Or option number 3, which we're going to give ourselves, is that you should just leave. You should just get out of Shanghai, just go so you're not here and they can't, like, go hunting for you. You know, we don't want to turn you over, blah, blah, blah. And this is where it sort of comes out that he's, like, he just sort of brings up, I was going to ask you to marry me, to the one woman who's had some screen time. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, okay, I guess that's the thing. All right, I guess we'll talk about that.
Again, this whole section here, you go to Shanghai and like, don't worry. Bruce Lee's whole thing is like, I don't want to leave you guys in the lurch. Like, they're going to keep on coming. And they're just like, don't worry about it. We're cool. We're not blaming you. Just please go away. And then they go with the marriage thing of, oh, I was going to ask you to marry me and blah, blah, blah. But like, all of that feels like it's going to result in bigger issues than it ends up actually doing, because ultimately, because of the next scenes that follow, what this all amounts to is multiple scenes of police and other political figures, I guess, coming in and saying, give us the murderer boy or else we're going to shut down your school and arrest you all. And they just repeat that scene like 3 times in a row before we hit the end. And that's where I felt the stagnation came in, where it didn't feel like there was a growing threat, or even you were saying there was a timer. Like there was one point where the guy says, time's up, give us Chen. And then they say, we don't know where he is. He says, okay, I'll give you one more day. It's like, you just keep doing this scene over and over again, you know?
I mean, no, you're right, but that's like a classic timer move, though, in a story, is you think the time is up, but they get like one like overtime like day or whatever. Like, the bomb's going to go off, but here's a reason why it's another 10 minutes to give us more tension.
Right. And if there was a reason, I would say, yeah, sure. Like, if they said, we don't know where he is, we promise we're trying.
David, I'm not defending it. I'm just saying that part of it specifically is not really something to critique. You want to critique the fact that there's no escalation and all the scenes feel the same, by all means, go right ahead.
No, but I'm saying, even from a timer standpoint, you're saying there's a reason why we've gone at overtime, whatever. I don't think they give a reason. I think that when the guy says, I'll give you one more day, it's literally just because they say, we don't know where he is, which they've already said in the previous 2 scenes.
I'm not saying they give a reason. I'm just saying I understand, in theory, that the plot or the reason for doing it. I understand the reason for trying to create this idea that if Bruce Lee ever stops to realize the trouble that he's causing the school by his murderous rampage, that he'll have a dilemma and a decision to make. That's what they're building up to, effectively. They just spend a lot of time doing that side of it.
I think that's also the other thing that you mentioned in Big Boss, and slight spoilers for Big Boss here, but that you thought before we went into the final fight scene, he should know about the fate of his significant other, his love interest, to like add some stakes to that. I feel like that's what I needed here, because at no point does he ever actually know about what's going on with the school. He's just completely divorced from all that as he's going on his rampage, and the school is totally separate right up until the end.
Yeah, so all your complaints, though, are all stuff that happens after this. At this point in the movie, I think everything they're doing here is completely fine. It's setting up this dilemma for them and this, like him in the school. Oh, there's also this romance element that's introduced, and it's all fine. And then, of course, that night, after he's had his heart-to-heart with the lady, he, hears the noise or whatever, and he goes and finds an open window, and he effectively stumbles down to the kitchen, where he hears the cook and the other guy basically talking about how they're planted here by the Japanese dojo and to poison the master, right? They killed him.
Yes. Now, I didn't fully understand this. I'm curious if you did. The one guy has his, stomach bandaged up.
Mm-hmm.
And then they show Bruce Lee specifically noticing that, and he says, you guys are Japanese. Is there something about his stomach being bandaged up that indicates he was Japanese? Did I miss something there?
Yeah, I have no idea what that means. I'm sure it makes sense if you know. But
okay,
I don't. Enough. But yes, I even take it as he thinks both of them are Japanese. I think he looked at him and said, "You're Japanese." Something about that was Japanese to him. Maybe.
Yeah. I thought maybe it was he was in the earlier fight and he's fixing himself up after they attacked the dojo. But then surely someone would have noticed that their cook, because that's who they say he is that he's the cook, is beating up his own students, you know?
Yeah. Or maybe... Well, no, maybe it's not that fight, though. Maybe he was injured in the fight with Bruce Lee at the other dojo. Maybe he was there during that fight.
Well, again, nobody was wearing masks or anything. You would think they would still recognize his face, but possible.
Well, it would just be Bruce Lee, and maybe Bruce Lee doesn't know who the cook is, because he's just arrived, and he's not been here in a while.
Oh, yeah, I forget. He wasn't always there. Yeah, he would have just been... Okay, yeah, maybe that explains it.
Yeah, maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's just, I kicked you earlier. That's why you've got a bandage on.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a nunchuck welt under there. Let me see.
Yeah, because I too went, wait, is there something Japanese about this bandage that I'm not following? Is this a corset thing?
It was that, or the bandage was just underneath his nipples, so I was like, is there Japanese nipples? Is that something that's identifying of race there? I'm confused.
Yeah, so he basically goes into the rage, right? This is where he snaps in the movie and starts fighting the guy with the bandages, to the point where he basically just does a couple of punches at the end of this into his stomach, and it's just the killing blows where the guy just kind of kills over, dies, and blood comes pouring out of his mouth, or paint, as the case may be. And then he's looking for the other guy, the guy that was the villain in the last movie, and he's looking for him, and he finds him, and sure enough, also kills him pretty quickly.
You know, maybe I'm the weird one, and I don't understand interrogation techniques, but I'm pretty sure killing the people who know the facts of what's going on is not a good way to get the facts of what's going on.
I mean, that's fair, but that's not a critique of the script. That's a critique of Bruce Lee being too much of a hothead in this movie.
No, I'm not critiquing the script at all.
So that's fair, I think.
I think by the time you hit the end of this movie, Bruce Lee has made it so that the school cannot clear their name. Like, he has absolutely ruined their chances of that.
But he, so he kills those two, and it's like, and to be fair, like, I didn't necessarily think he was a psychopath in the moment, because I thought, okay, he's heard this news, they've tried to run or tried to kill him so he can't reveal that they're, but obviously they're no match for him, so he just takes them out, and he's so angry that these blows kill them, and that's fine. But the next morning, when someone comes out of the school and goes, hey, there's two people hanging, I think one's the chef, and they're hanging in the street corner, and they go and fight, and they're on display. They're on display the same way that like John Doe in Seven puts a victim on display, right? Or like a mob boss puts up someone that they've took a hit on to like, hey,
no, this is a warning. This isn't just a like, oh, I need to dispose of some bodies. This is and for all the Japanese out there.
Yeah. So Bruce Lee goes AWOL at this point, and he basically never interacts with the school until the end, with the exception of the woman who comes to see him at one point and finds him. But
he did contact the new sensei and left him a note that said, hey, I found out our teacher was poisoned. Don't worry, I'm going to get revenge.
Yeah, don't worry about it. I'm going nuclear.
Yeah. And then immediately, as soon as they see the bodies, the whole rest of like the school goes and sits down, and they're like, well, we need to find out who killed them. It's like, that's the only way we're going to be able to like get any justice here. And the teacher turns around being like, it was Chen, it was Bruce Lee, he did it. And everyone's like, well, how do you know? He's like, he wrote a note and admitted to it. Like, that was him.
He left a note.
Yeah.
So because some of the political stuff that's going on in this movie is kind of this thing where, so we're in Shanghai, and it sounds like there's like districts in Shanghai that are sort of kind of like, I almost took it like, and I'm sure it's not the exact same thing here, but I was almost like hearing it in the same way like an airport is like international grounds, where this is the part of the city which is designated for, in this case, the Japanese population who live here, and they've got like a delegate and all that, and it's a bit of a political nightmare to like try and like arrest a Japanese citizen who's here on an official business or whatever.
Yes, we also skipped over the one scene where Bruce Lee tries to go into a park, and
that already happened?
Yeah, that was that was before he comes. That was just after he beats up the dojo, but before he comes back to his own dojo.
No, I'm glad you bring this up, because I want to talk about this, because I want to talk about the insane end to this scene where he takes a plaque off the wall, right? We'll talk about what's on the plaque in a second, but he takes a plaque off the wall, he kicks it up into the air, and then jumps and like dive kicks it with the other foot to smash it into like a billion pieces. It's the most ridiculous kind of badass thing that I loved it.
Before I realized how much the movie was going to be like him being a psychopath, I genuinely believed for a moment that this movie was going to be Bruce Lee kicking racism into submission, because that was like the sign. We'll talk about it. So at the park, he tries to enter this park. There's a guard there who's a Sikh man, and he tries to enter, and the guard stops him and says, look at the sign. And the sign says, no dogs are Chinese. And then as he's looking at the sign, a woman with a dog enters the park, and Bruce is like, yo man, what about that? And he's like, I like the dog more than I like you. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah, and then a guy comes up and says, hey, if you get on all fours and pretend you're a dog, I'll walk you in. And that's when Bruce Lee decides to get kicking.
Yep. And again, like that whole lead up, I'm like, okay. And we've already established this thing with the Japanese dojo being like against the Chinese people. So like maybe this is going to be a thing where Bruce Lee just attacks all the racists on like moral grounds. And as we're leaving this scene here, that's kind of the last point where the race thing really comes up, because from here on out, it is 100%, oh, they poisoned my sensei, and that's why I'm angry.
Yeah. There's maybe a brief kind of like insinuation when they're talking about the fact that they've done this together, they're the bad guys, that they did this purely because just in case like he's training like all these Chinese martial artists, we don't want to have like any opposition that could take us on, so that's why we wanted to get rid of that school, because if we don't want them to be able to build like someone that can fight us. We want to be the only group of martial artists that are running around that are in an organized form.
Yeah, it's the equivalent of anytime that in America there's like a black group that exercises gun rights, it's like, well, that's not okay, that's a white person thing.
Yeah, so yeah, crazy little scene actually earlier on, but like this is where he goes AWOL, and he's camping out because they talk about where could he be at one point, and the woman goes and finds him, and he's killed a rabbit or something, and he's
was that a rabbit?
I don't know. Well, it was skinned. So it was hard to tell because it was already just meat. But
I had no idea what I was looking at. I was bouncing between like rabbit, raccoon, and monkey. Like it was completely. It was 4 limbs that were all stretched out wide, so it was hard to tell. But it was.
No, I was thinking rabbit or squirrel. That was my guesses.
All right, fair enough.
What I could make out, but like it was hard because it was already been skinned. It was just like the flesh. It was just the meat on the bone.
Yeah, that was already charred.
But so yeah, they have a heart to heart. I don't really have anything to say about the heart to heart. It's basically just so you know at the end it's not going to be a happy ending, because they talk about how, hey, I'll go with you when you leave Shanghai, and we'll go live a life together. I used to imagine that we'd be married, and I'd be a teacher, and you'd pick me up at school, and just she says a bunch of stuff, and all I could think was like, this is also we feel sad at the end when you can't be together for either because he dies in combat or because, as we see what happens later, happens. But
yeah, the only thing that I wanted to bring up in this scene is, he basically says, look, I have a plan. I don't want to tell you what it is. And, like, just don't worry about it. And then she brings up rightly the fact of, I think one of them mentioned Wu or something like that. One of the villains, when he overheard them, mentioned Wu. So she's like, Wu, isn't that the name of that interpreter guy? And you see the light bulb go off on his head. Like, you see him be like, oh,
it's a lead.
You're right. It's that. So here's my question. If that's the lead he gets, what was his plan? What was his original plan that he was like, I don't want to tell you what it is? Because all I can imagine is it was going to be the third act where he just storms in and kills everybody.
I mean, probably. Maybe he'd have still done the phone repair trick to do some surveillance first. But yeah, because this is where we basically get into the series of disguises. So I think the first one is just, what would you call the little cart thing again? Is it a rickshaw?
Yes, it was a rickshaw.
Rickshaw, right. So basically there's a sequence where the sleazy lawyer type dude is with the dojo master, and they're having they've got like a stripper in who's doing like a dance and taking off her clothes. For some reason has like modesty things on her nipples, but takes off her skirt and like, flashes them out. I don't know, it was whatever. But basically, they're all drinking, they're all drunk, and they're like, hey, yeah, we did great today. We've got that other school on the ropes. Oh, this is great. And the sleazy lawyer stumbles out of the building, and he goes out to the rickshaw, and he says, hey, you, take me so-and-so. And you can just see when the guy's head comes up, the hat lifts a little bit, and you can tell it's Bruce Lee. He is now the rickshaw driver. Is driver the right term? I don't know.
I'd say driver. In terms of its disguises, it's the weakest one, but it also sets a good tone of he's going to be used as disguises.
But it's the first one. It's all about the escalation, right? So this
Which, to be fair, I don't think it escalates. I think it goes like lowest one, medium one is last, and then the most involved is the middle one.
Yeah, I suppose. But the point is that he takes him on this ride, and then instead of going where he wants to, he takes him down an alleyway, and then Bruce Lee picks up the entire rickshaw whilst the guy's sitting in it.
Yeah,
this was a visual.
It was. I mean, I'll give him credit for it. Like, I'm sure it had the assistance of machinery and wires and all that sort of stuff, but they do the bit where when he's not getting a straight answer from the lawyer guy, he throws the cart off to the side, and it looks like a real throw. Like, it tumbles over on the side of itself. So it's not just like wires dangling from above that's making this work.
And just to paint the visual here, when we say he picks up the rickshaw, he's in the position where he's like driving it, right? So he's holding the two beams
between
at the
two
side.
poles.
Yeah. He turns around, looks at him, and then just picks it up from his end, from the beams. So it's like he's picking up a giant, like, I don't know, utensil with a man at the end of it. Right? It's very impressive and looks like he's using a lot of strength. Now, he's not the strongest person in the movie, because there's a Russian guy introduced later who can like bend metal bars that are clearly fake, might I add, but...
I like how I introduced this saying, like, oh, the fight scenes are a lot more realistic in this. And then these scenes, as I'm remembering them, are like, Okay, but they also have super people.
Yes, they have super people, yes.
Yeah.
So he throws him around, and he does remember to get the intel before he kills him, because he makes the guy admit who he works for, who ordered the kill, whatever. And then, of course, he kills him anyway, because, he's on his rampage. And he hangs him up on the same lamppost as the previous two guys he killed. It's more of a message.
In fairness, he does turn away and theoretically was going to let this man live. But then the lawyer guy picks up a rock and goes to attack Bruce Lee. And that's when Bruce Lee kills him. So maybe there was a point there where he was going to live, but then Bruce Lee was like, nah, I gave you one chance, you blew it.
Yeah, because that's the thing. This guy is a sleazeball, and he's talked a big game. He makes fun of everyone, saying, "Oh, you're all weaklings. You can never fight us." And then, as soon as Bruce Lee's got him alone in an alleyway, he breaks immediately and starts begging and saying anything he wants to know. He's a little shit. But then, he tries to hit Bruce Lee, and Bruce Lee kills him.
So over with the head of the other dojo, the Japanese boss, the main recurring thing going on here is that they've contacted, again, the political structure is a little bit weird, but it seems like there is a police force that is actually Chinese, and then there is also people in power who are Japanese, and they're talking to the head of the Chinese police force saying, hey, get this school, go arrest all of them. They're responsible for the death of those two cook guys, and now also Mr. Wu. But then they're threatening him by saying if it comes down to like a race thing, then ultimately they're going to get the Japanese force involved, which seems like it'll be worse to some extent.
Yes. Also, they have a new Russian friend who shows up and demonstrates.
He's at the dinner, yeah.
Yeah, he demonstrates that he can bend bars. He doesn't break wood with his hand, which is what you normally see a martial artist do. He takes nails and just drives them into the plank of wood with his bare hand, and I'm like, that just looks painful in so many ways.
But he's so strong, Pete.
He's so strong, yes. Yep. So that goes on with him. Bruce Lee continuing his little escapades. He also disguises himself as an old man with a grey beard. He's got makeup on. He's went all out for this disguise.
I didn't recognize him at first. He's standing there on the side, and I'm like, oh, that's weird. Who's that old man going to be? And then as soon as he passes over the paper and gives that look, I'm like, son of a bitch, Bruce Lee.
Yeah, and then of course there's the phone repairman, which is the glasses, and he's got, to be fair, he's still, he's got the blue hat and he's got the blue overalls. He climbs a phone pole and cuts their phone line so that they think there's a problem, so that when he shows up as a repairman, they're like, yes, what take you so long?
Dude, if there was ever going to be, back in this time period, a Chinese knockoff to the Superman films, Bruce Lee has convinced me he can play Clark Kent.
Sure.
This is absolutely the bumbling, completely aloof, smiling all the time kind of repairman. Even with the square glasses going on, he has absolutely got that role nailed.
Yeah. Which, again, this is one of these things where I never thought... I'm obviously phones existed in some form in 1905, but the idea of calling out the phone repairman just doesn't feel very 1905 to me.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like this is... Especially, I guess phone problems were probably different back then, where if all the phones went out in the house, I think the first thing I would think is, oh, there's something wrong with the wires outside my house, not my phones need repairing.
Yes.
But I guess that could make sense at that point in time.
Yeah. So Bruce Lee's whole thing is to come in and pretend that he's fixing the phones as he kind of watches this display of the Russian guy bending metal, and I was thinking, oh, is he going to strategize because he's seen this? And I'm like, I don't even know if he needs to be honest.
Yeah,
this feels okay. He knows he has to punch this guy really hard. That's it. That's the only intel he got.
Yeah, it's between this and the newspaper, the old man thing. It feels like these scenes are supposed to be him collecting intel, but if you told me what he honestly learned across these scenes, it doesn't feel like much. It still feels like his plan was going to be the same regardless. The
only thing I think he technically learns here is that the second phone he has to look at is in the main bad guy's office, the head of the dojo. So he is taken to his office, so he knows where his office is, and he knows unequivocally who it is that he's aiming for ultimately. So I guess that's intel. But I mean, it's not like when he comes into the place to actually do the third act, like he just kind of storms in and just goes through them. He does give some of the lower downs a chance, like, hey, anyone who wants to leave, I'll let you go. Like you don't have to like die for this.
I'm here for your boss. He's the one who ordered the poisoning, according to lawyer guy. Everyone else is just meat in my way.
Yes, and that's how it progresses. And which is not to say there isn't some fun fights to be had along the way. I think when he's fighting the Russian guy, there's some particularly nice like slow-mo, like when he hits him really hard, you get the whole thing with the cheek in slow-mo, like rippling as he like goes down. They feel big hits.
Yeah. There's also before that Russian fight, there's another fight back in like the main dojo area where he's fighting against a guy who has a katana, and the fight ends with him knocking the katana out of the dude's hand up into the air, then like punches him in the face and bends him over so the katana comes straight down and impales him through the back. And it's such a good visual.
Yeah, that was a really good moment, actually, yeah. Just the way he kind of like pulls him out of position for it it just felt really badass, which is kind of like what he's got the whole time. But of course, this whole time, what we're getting at the school and all that is that, he's on a rampage, he's killing people, we have to find him, we have to find Shen, however we can, when we can.
Yeah.
You know?
And like the one cop I mentioned before, he's coming in saying like, if you can't find him, I'm going to have to hold all of you guys responsible, and we're going to arrest all of you, or else the Japanese people are going to come in and they're going to do it. And the school is basically saying, like, we don't know where he is. We have no idea. And then the girlfriend standing off to the side, just, like, twirling her hair, like, I don't know what's happening.
Yeah, the funny thing, one of the reasons why I think you feel this plot goes nowhere is because she eventually admits that she knows where he goes at night. And she doesn't tell the police that, but she tells the rest of the school.
The school, yeah.
And they all go to that meeting place, and he doesn't show up. And it's like, oh, he's just not here tonight then. So it never actually amounts to anything that she admits that she knew where he was going. Like, it's just a dead end as far as plot goes.
Right. And that also happens to be simultaneously the night where he's off to go do the third act, but also the main villain has told his lackeys, go take care of the school. Like, well, I don't want to...
This was the one part of this that I actually quite liked, was how dark this was. That the main bad guy is like, hey, we can't have them around. Let's just make sure they can't be around. Go kill them all. And a small group of them, notably the ones with the more recognizable faces, seem to have not been there, probably because they were going to meet or try and find Chen at that meeting place. But when they come back, they basically just walk into everyone being dead. There's like one or two people who are still kind of alive, but everyone else is just dead. It's just like a mess of corpses, including like the one other notable female character who wasn't the love interest. Like, she's one of the dead bodies. So there's at least a couple that are kind of recognizable or that are dead. They're not just purely red shirts. But it does feel quite dark, and it kind of feels like, hey, I feel like Chen has to feel guilty about this because he kind of like pushed this all to this point where they wanted this level of because this is the thing. Chen's off doing the third act whilst they find all this, and he doesn't know what's happened. He actually comes back for the final scene of the movie when they're talking to the police about all these dead bodies, and sort of discovers, oh wait, like they came over and killed everyone. And like it kind of reminded me of this is a weird thing to spoil here, but spoilers for the end of season 4 of Dexter for anyone who cares about this. But there's a whole thing where, Dexter's whole thing was killing serial killers, blah, blah, and he spent all the season trying to kill John Lithgow. In the finale, he finally does, only to discover that before John Lithgow's character died, he'd already murdered Dexter's wife. And the sort of the bitter sweetness, other than just the obvious death part of that, was the idea that he can't get revenge for that now because he already killed the guy that did it. Right. And that's what this felt like to me, is when Chen comes back and sees what they have done, he's like, I already did the revenge, and I can't do it again for this.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I agree with you. I think that is the intention, and it does work on some level, but I also think that the way that his devotion here has been shown throughout the movie, it feels like he was really, really devoted to his teacher, but not so much the school, as obvious by the fact that he is going against one of the core tenets of we don't fight unless like absolutely need be. He just goes out and kills people, no problem. I think there's the bit where the new teacher he sees like the dead bodies of all the people that were his students, and he's like, we're done. Like we've lost our way. Our school is pretty much no more because of all of this that happened. And so Chen coming in, I feel like, yes, he realizes the pain that he's caused, but I don't think that he feels that same sort of righteous anger of, oh no, now I can't avenge my school, because he knows this is his fault. Like, this isn't even something where
I'm not saying
it's the other person making the call.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's the exact same thing. I just think it's a comparison worth drawing, is that he can't go and get revenge now, and it ultimately leads to him sort of stepping out and admitting that he's there, because it's right at the point where the police are saying, hey, we're going to have to arrest all of you for all this. And I feel like the cop is conveniently not really paying attention to the fact that there's dead bodies all around him. Like, someone came in and murdered dozens of people, and it feels like he's almost ignoring that just to pursue the case that he was supposed to be on. And I'm like, call in like the forensics here.
Or, well, no, there's the Chinese cop, and now there's the Japanese like politician guy, like that's the ambassador, whatever. And the Chinese cop, like, they appeal to him. They're like, bro, look at this. This is messed up, and we know exactly. Yeah, we know exactly who did it because we got 2 survivors there. And that's when the Japanese guy's like, that sounds like a bunch of allegations and not the reason we're here. So you can go ahead and do your report in the morning. Meanwhile, give us Chen. And they all are just like, are you serious right now? Are you kidding me? And he's just like, yeah, no, this is. Yeah. And it's that last little dying thing of the race like relations. It's that last little bit of like, they're treated as subhuman. They're treated like, you know, this is just what you deserve, and one of you committed a crime, so we're going to try you for that anyway.
Yeah. No, I mean, I like the idea that Bruce Lee's off doing his third act, getting his revenge, killing the main bad guy, which he does, and then only to find out that all this other worse stuff has happened without him even knowing about it because he was so disconnected from everyone else. I like the raw idea of that, and the general sort of sense of like, because the entire time throughout the movie, there's no point, once he starts killing people, the movie never once tries to justify it and say he's in the right and he's acting like the hero of the movie. Everyone talks about it like, no, he has went off the deep end, he's on this warpath, and he's entertaining to watch while he's doing it, and it's almost comical because of the costumes and like how the lengths he's going to get all this stuff done without the motivation to be doing it for a good reason, which I thought was quite entertaining, and arguably in some ways maybe even unintentionally so, because I just thought it was really funny that he was killing people like so like blatantly.
Yeah.
But I do appreciate that he comes back at the end and sees like, okay, oh shit, all these innocent young people are dead. I probably have something to do with this, so I'm going to turn myself in and just, you know, have them save the school. And he even says to the policeman, the detective, is like, hey, if I just like come willingly and turn myself in, you promise you won't shut down the school. And at this point, I'm like, there's like 6 people left at the school. I don't know if they can even maintain the building anymore. I don't know. But the policeman's like, you have my word. Like, I will do everything in my power to make sure they don't shut down this school.
Legally, they are completely in the clear. Tax-wise, they still need to pay their taxes.
Yeah. And that's the end of the movie, pretty much.
Well, no, I'm going to argue that point, because I think that the last exact shot in this movie implies...
Oh, of course. Oh, yeah. Do you know what? I forgot about this. I actually totally forgot about this final moment. So, Bruce Lee... So, you actually... A minute ago, you said that was the end of, like, the last little bit of the race stuff. I'm going to argue that and say that this final shot is the end of the race stuff.
50-50, and I'll let you... We'll do the shot, and then I'll say my point.
So yeah, Bruce Lee is getting escorted out of the building, and he's had like a long, loving look at his love interest, because as she's realizing, oh, you're going away to prison. Oh no, like we can't have our future together. And they go outside.
Maybe in the next movie I'll meet up with Jackie Chan.
They go outside. That is
actually what happens.
And they see I think it's the Japanese police or military.
I think so, because they all came with the Japanese guy.
Yeah. And they're all waiting at the entrance to the courtyard of this dojo. Well, it's not a dojo; it's a Chinese place, but whatever. And they're all got their guns pointed at them, and Bruce Lee looks over at them and is basically just instantly enraged that they dare like stand there in a firing squad position like that, pointing guns at the school that he's master taught at, or however you want to interpret it. But he just says, you know what, F this. I'm going to run and murder these fools. And he runs towards the camera, jumps into a kick, and it basically like freeze frames as you hear gunshots and it fades to black.
So, I mean, here's the thing. You want to go out with the Bolivian firing squad ending, so be it. That's fine. But, like, I was actually kind of amazed with the fact that they did it, you know? Like, it's one thing of just like, oh, I'm giving myself up. There are consequences for doing my actions and causing so much death, which, frankly, that's what it is.
Yeah, this feels a little bit like you could argue that the characters realized, I don't really want to spend all those years in prison. I'm just going to get myself killed right now so that I don't have to do that.
Yeah, death by cop, absolutely. But even then, it's a little bit strange to me, the fact that he's like, no, I'm going to give myself up willingly. And then the moment he sees the Japanese aiming guns at him, he just snaps. And I'm going to say, like, yes, obviously them having guns trained on him is a little bit of racial in there. But I'm also going to defend them by saying, this man has killed, as far as they know, 3 people. In actuality, closer to like 17 at this point. I would be afraid for him to come out as well when his hands are deadly weapons like that. I think that is absolutely a good use of, I'm just going to have this weapon just in case you decide to, I don't know, do a flying jump kick in my direction. Oh, look, here he comes.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of, like, the thing that it does is that it kind of negates what just happened in the sense that, okay, he's had his little arc that's sort of like happened right at the end where he's like, okay, I realize there's consequences for what I've done. I'm going to accept them. And then you could argue, I suppose, that the final point of the movie is that, yeah, but he's still him. He's still going to get mad. Something's still going to enrage him. And it's a tragedy almost. It's a tragedy that he is like being enraged this much that he's going to throw away his life. Now, I don't think the movie's writing is deep enough to sell either of those like arc moments. And that's a fair complaint. I think as a kung fu movie, it's pretty entertaining and he is captivating to watch.
Oh yeah,
pretty much every time he's on camera.
There's one part that I liked so much in Big Boss is how even when he wasn't doing his fighting, when he was at the pacifist point of his life, I still found him engaging. I still found him to be an interesting character to watch. This time, it's the reverse of that, where he is constantly fighting, but he is still just engaging as a character. Like, there is just this natural, I don't want to say charisma, because at certain points he does just go completely off the deep end, but, like, there is this charm that Bruce Lee has that makes you want to root for him, even when he's doing things that are, like, clearly the wrong thing to do.
Yeah. So it's very much a tragedy, and like you could see like a more nuanced version that could be written to do that. It does in some ways feel like it's trying to punch a bit higher than what Big Boss did, but maybe like doesn't quite hit its like narrative aspirations. But in terms of its kung fu aspirations of like a fun action movie, I would say it mostly works on that level. I was entertained. It moves at a reasonable pace. Like you say, some of the scenes with the school are a bit repetitious. But I think it's particularly once the detective comes in, because I feel like the scene with the detective talking to them is the part that feels like they're going in circles a little bit.
They do that exact scene like 2, maybe 3 times, depending on how you count it.
Yeah. So, like, I would agree with that. I think it definitely is flawed, and it definitely has its cheesy moments. Although, the cheesy moments actually kind of vary between, oh, this is cheesy and kind of old school and dated, to, oh, this is cheesy but kind of charming in the way that it's cheesy. It kind of bounces between those a little bit. What's funny is that this movie has a stronger rate in IMDb than the last one did, so I kind of went in thinking, oh, this will be a bit better, sort of, in terms of just like, oh, I'm probably going to agree with that. Right. And the weird thing is I come out of it thinking, no, I think I probably feel at a similar level for both, but I like them both for different reasons.
Yeah, because the last one it had a little bit of a stronger story element to it, but this one, the action is just so much more over the top that it balances that back out.
Yeah. So, for what it's worth, I think it's an entertaining movie, and I'm I think it's one that I'd happily throw on again and enjoy the beats of it, and I might even enjoy it more in a repeat viewing just because I know what it's not going to be. I can just enjoy the fun dressing up and beating the crap out of the villains for what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, absolutely. I'm curious if I would get more of those comedy beats you were talking about if I did watch the dub, because I would say I didn't find anything in like the production of this really super comedic in the way you were talking about. I think that there were some moments that, you know, gave a laugh just because of the way they were built, but I don't think it was really anything that was too funny. So I wonder if there was more of that in the dub than there was.
I don't know. I mean, because what I thought was funny wasn't really. I mean, the lawyer dude had a funny voice, to be fair, but for the most part, I was laughing at the henchman's haircuts. I was laughing at just the general direction of what Bruce Lee's character was. Like, when he started hanging dead people up and then was just hunting down people that he killed them like a hit list, I went, you're basically just a serial killer now.
Right.
And I thought that was a really funny thing. And I like, the more he leaned into that, the more like laughter I was having. So I wouldn't say it had anything to do with the dub per se, because it doesn't sound like story-wise there was much of a difference between what I watched and what you watched.
Yeah, story-wise, not at all. I guess I was just wondering if maybe there was something in terms of, you know, in the way that Big Boss had slightly different conversations depending on whether or not you were listening to the dub or not. I wondered if there was anything like that. But yeah, it sounds like everything's basically, the things you found funny were things that are on-screen elements, not really related that much to the dub itself.
Yeah, just larger plot like directions and elements, or what were making me laugh. So arguably some of that's a little unintentional, but I kind of liked it though, in the sense that it is a bit unusual for an action movie for the main character to just be unhinged. It's not. I mean, it's not completely unique. Don't get me wrong. But there's definitely other movies where it's about a main character on a rampage but it never tends to play it in this way where they're like a tragic figure who's going to go down for it at the end. I think that's a little bit more unique.
Well, it strikes me, you were talking before at the beginning about how a lot of this felt more like 40s and 50s sort of like dialogue and stuff like that.
Yeah, it was the characters talking about the school, it was the romance part, all that stuff felt like super old fashioned in the way it was written to me.
That's kind of how the ending came across to me. Not in the firing squad aspect of it, but in the aspect
I was going to say, that's a bit darker for a movie from that era.
No, just in the idea that, you know, Hays Code era, anybody who commits crimes should be punished. Like that sort of thing, where you don't get this sort of anti-hero that gets off scot-free. It's someone who don't do the crime if you don't want to do the time sort of aspect.
Yeah, this is interesting. I think what surprised me is how different it is to Fist of Fury or to Big Boss, because I assumed it was going to feel like an evolution, and in some ways it does because they all have the same cast and stuff like that. But it also feels like they wanted to do something different, even though that core idea of we're still going to have consequences for whatever the main character does. Because at the end of the last movie, it was kind of like, okay, there's consequences because the law would dictate there should be, but we're kind of on his side because they really it's like these villains didn't have it coming in this movie, but Bruce Lee was provoked into a position where he had to fight back in Big Boss. Here it's like he one little alteration made him look for blood, and to be fair, once he finds out, oh no, they actually killed the guy that I was here to say goodbye to, that's the moment where, okay, that's it, all bets are off. He's just going to go on a rampage now.
I will say there is one bit towards the end. I was just clicking through the final scene here. One line towards the end did kind of rub me the wrong way, and it's from the new teacher character, the guy who inherited the role. His whole group is dead. He's come across all their bodies. He sits down. He's defeated. He's broken. And he says the line, Jen was right. Jen was right. And all I could think was, he caused this. Maybe on a long enough time scale, this was inevitable when the Japanese, were coming after you. You had to either fight against them or you had to bow down to their commands, whatever it may be. But this is absolutely a result of him going out and killing their guys. To say he was right kind of feels like it defeats the purpose of, this is something that could have been avoided if it wasn't for his anger and his fury.
Yeah, I think I read that as the character saying is this would have happened eventually, even if Chen didn't get involved. Like, this was always the end game for the Japanese dojo, was to just get rid of us one way or another.
Right.
So maybe he's saying, hey, if we'd backed Chen up and went to fight with him, this wouldn't have went as badly. Like, we would have backed him up and we would have had a more clear victory where most of us didn't end up dead.
Just continuing the constant notion of join a union.
I guess, yeah.
Back each other up. Don't go in alone.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah. But I think that's the thing, though, is that the script, I don't think, is smart enough to actually explore any of these like themes with any great depth. It's like it wants to be deeper than it is, but it isn't really hitting any deeper than it actually is.
Right. Yeah.
So,
yeah, I'd say so.
All right. Okay. Well, David, what was your scene of the movie?
My scene of the movie, I feel like it's probably gotta be, it's towards the third act. I think originally, as I'm watching through it, I think that it's the rickshaw scene as it happens, because it's just so over the top and like crazy with how it gets there. But I think ultimately I come down on the combo fight scenes in the third act of guy with the katana who gets impaled with himself, and then the fight with the Russian, just because there was some really solid choreography there, and it felt like the best fight scenes the movie had to offer.
Yeah. I don't even remember what fight it was, but there was a really great moment where, like, after he probably killed someone, where the camera just went right into his eyes, and it was like this intense moment. Really good stuff. Yeah, the rickshaw is tempting to pick, because I really like that scene. And specifically, obviously the picking up and all that, but even the start of it, when you realize that he is the guy driving the rickshaw, it's like that moment's like, oh, yeah, the excitement now is like, how is he going to pop up to like take them out? Like, how's he going to keep appearing? What the costumes going to be? Like, that was a big part of the fun. That said, though, I did really like that first big scene where he went to their dojo, because I mean, it had everything. It had the nunchucks, it had him taking on a bunch of people at once, it had them making the other two guys eat the paper. Like, there was a lot to like in that section. So I'm going to go with that, but it is pretty close.
Okay, yeah. And I did check on the length of that, because you said 5 to 10 minutes. It was basically exactly 5 minutes.
Really? Okay, yeah. But you know, it's a very continuous scene, so it feels like a long time. Not in a bad way either. Just
right.
All right. So, what was MVP of the movie then?
I mean, is there any? Yeah,
it's Bruce.
I
will be impressed if any of these movies the MVP isn't Bruce.
I still think Enter the Dragon may have enough of an ensemble that you might have a chance with someone else.
Hey,
but
I like John Saxon, so he might make a play for it in Enter the Dragon.
But yeah, no, this one, nobody even steps up close enough. Like, the boss on the enemy side doesn't have enough time. The lawyer is maybe given enough time. He could have made a play, but his character's just not nearly enough to be an MVP. And then nobody at the school really has enough time either. So it's got to be Bruce.
Yeah. It almost feels like all the characters at the school are characters from an older era of movies. But Bruce Lee's characters, like, no, he's a gritty, modern, like, you know, vengeful
I kind of wonder
guy.
if there's a backstory somewhere of what he was off doing that when he came back to the school. Because it feels like, you know, all these people are just in this specific town. They know the rules of how it was played. Meanwhile, he was off in some other city.
What if he was just off as the same character in Big Boss? This is just him getting back from prison after he served time for killing the bad guys in the first movie.
He's like, well, I went and visited my mom. You won't believe what happened to me, guys. Oh no, my sensei's dead.
That's so weird that my love interest at this school looks the exact same as the love interest that I found with my cousins.
He's got a type, which turns out to be his cousin.
It's a very specific type.
Yeah.
Very specific type. All right.
Also, he would have had to go back 70 years because it's set in 1908. But whatever.
Don't pick holes in my genius tapestry, okay?
Right. Sorry. I'm sure somewhere in Game of Death there will be a time machine aspect that'll tie it all together.
Well, I mean, Game of Death technically finished a movie that Bruce Lee died when he was making, by repurposing it into a new thing using the footage they already shot. So in a way, that movie was kind of like a time travel-y kind of thing.
Perfect.
Anyway, all right, do your category ratings.
All right, visuals. I'd say it's good. I think there's a good color choice is made that always makes it so certain things pop, but I don't think like cinematography wise it's anything too over the top. Most of my visual interest comes from the choreography, which I'm not going to attribute to this category. So all in all, I'm going to say that it's probably 7 for me. Sound, again, there was no score that really stood out. It really didn't do a lot there, but it also wasn't intrusive either. If I can attribute Bruce Lee's screams and shouts as he's doing his stuff to sound, I'll bump this up to a 5.5, but otherwise it just feels right down the middle.
I wonder if that was like in the dub, if that was still his sounds in the soundtrack, because it could have been.
I compared it to the original like Chinese, the one that matched up with like their mouths moving and all that, and it was there. So I assume it would be the same.
Okay.
So that gets a 5.5. Acting, I don't think anybody really falls flat. I think everyone's pretty good as who they play as. Some people are meant to just kind of be the butt monkeys, like the lawyer and those two weird-haired students, but they play their roles well enough. And then I think Bruce also does a good job of, like, again, his charm, his charisma, despite the fact that he is borderline a serial killer here, you still like him. You still want to see him succeed. So all in all, acting, I think I would probably give 6.5, just a little bit less than the 7 I gave the last one. Script is where it really falls apart compared to the last one. Like I said, I had some pacing issues with the back half, and I don't think the story is as strong as the prior film. I think that it has a little bit more in terms of action, but I wouldn't attribute that to script. I think that's much more in the production value. So I'm going to give that one just a flat 6. And then on top of that, with the production values, this is where the choreography really does come to shine. I think they do a great job of making all the fight scenes work. So I'm going to give that one a little bit higher than the last one and give that one an 8.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I don't think mine's going to sway too much from what you just said. I mean, I think visuals 7 feels about right. There's some nice moments, some nice like capturing of the fighting. Those quick edits are kind of gone, and it feels like you get to like chew on what you're seeing a little bit more, so everything kind of resonates visually. So I think 7's right, because at the same time I don't think it's doing anything super like exciting from a like general cinematography level, but it captures the fighting well enough, which is kind of mostly what you'd be wanting from this. Sound, yeah, it's weird. It's weird to rate this category for something that's been dubbed when I didn't have the choice of picking the original. But I would say, like, I don't know. Do I dock it some points because some of the voice acting in the dub was a little bit hokey, particularly for the lawyer, which was really over the top.
If you're talking about the lawyer, I mean, I checked on the original. He's putting on a voice like that as well. Like they're imitating it close to life, however hokey it may have been originally.
Okay. I guess I got a 5 with sound, so I'll say that. For acting, this is another one where I think it's probably like a 7, mainly because Bruce Lee has the charisma and the charm, and he makes every scene he's in compelling. Some others are solid enough supporting players, some are a bit too over the top and kind of drag it down a little bit. But at the same time, none of the characters are nuanced enough to really like have an actor really sink their teeth into and like show, hey, I can really perform. But the star power of Bruce Lee definitely drags up a bit. I think if Bruce Lee wasn't Bruce Lee in this, it would probably be like down at a 5 or something.
Right.
But because Bruce Lee is Bruce Lee, it heavily drags it up. Script and story, that's definitely kind of a weaker element. I can kind of see how it could become something, like how you could take this as a building block and build a meatier story around it.
I mean, Fist of Fury is its own series where they have recurring characters. Like I said, the next one I think is called New Fist of Fury, and it stars Jackie Chan as not the same character, but in the same universe.
Interesting. So I'll go 6. Like, I think it's serviceable Clearly, there's a lot more that they could have done with a lot of these elements, though. Production value, yeah, obviously they've got more money here. They've got bigger sets. They've got all these things, but the real standout is the more advanced choreography and just the like. I guess choreography and stunt work does kind of come under production value in a lot of ways, because it's basically just you can afford to do that stuff. So on that level, I think this is maybe like a 7.5. But I've not rated anything higher than a 7.5, so it's not like it's. Yeah, no particular element stands out as like super amazing, but those fight scenes are very good. Which, I mean, arguably, like I don't even know where to put that necessarily. I guess because the weird thing about this in particular is that the fight scenes are partly really great because Bruce Lee's Bruce Lee, so part of it's the acting, but part of it's the stunt choreography, and that's like under production values. So I think they combine to be more than what I've rated both of them. But I don't think either one of them I can say, oh, on their own, they deserve a higher number. So sometimes things are a bit more than the sum of their parts, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Yeah. And that's the case with a couple of the elements here. Which leads us to our final rating, which in no way has to be an average of the other numbers. It can be whatever you want. It may be an average, it might work out to be an average, but sometimes it might be higher or lower because you just feel like, despite everything you've said, it just doesn't click, or it does click in a way that doesn't make sense. But yes, what are you rating Fist of Fury?
For me, if Big Boss was a 7, I think that, like we said, there is less story here, but it does start to really codify a bunch of what I expect out of a Bruce Lee Kung Fu movie, or whatever his actual method is here. I think that it is just a little bit more than that, but it still is in kind of the same category. So it's going to be a 7.5, but just like barely squeaking that compared to the 7 that the last one got. I think it is still a good movie, and like you said, it's enjoyable enough that it could garner a rewatch at some point, but I think that it is still kind of trying to figure out exactly what kind of story it is working with, where the Kung Fu can just take center stage and the story will help it rather than hold it back at points.
All right. Yeah, I think overall, like, I almost still want to just go with the 7 for this one, because I do feel like they both end up in a similar place for me, but for different reasons, with different strengths. Once it got into him putting on disguises and just hunting the bad guys down, I was having like a blast of a time, even if it's not exactly high art. So I think I go with 7.
Okay.
So that's me.
So now, in terms of making the cut, last one, Big Boss, we said was cutting it close. So do we feel that that's in the same sort of area, or do we think that it managed to squeak higher?
I don't think it squeaks higher. I think it's probably cutting it close as well. Maybe slightly lower within that category, perhaps.
Oh, okay.
Well,
so you enjoyed it more, but you think it's lower?
Well, you rated it lower, did you not?
No. I mean, I rated that one lower than this one did. This movie got higher.
Oh, did it? I thought you gave it 6.5. Oh, never mind.
No.
Okay.
7.5.
I misheard you. Never mind. Well, in that case, okay, it's in the same category, but slightly higher then. But I don't know if it. I don't think it quite makes it to making the cut. But it's in that kind of category where if you like this type of movie, then yeah, by all means, go for it. But it's maybe only for people who are interested in this type of movie. This is like an acquired taste or whatever, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's, again, like I said, I feel like it's still kind of just finding its footing, trying to figure out exactly what's going to work for it. I can't say I'm familiar with Way of the Dragon, which is what's up next, but that strikes me as where they do finally figure it out.
I think if we were doing a martial arts movie podcast, I think this would make the cut on the basis of, if you're into martial arts movies, this is probably up in the scale of like being a bit higher than if you're compared it towards general cinema. But where we are, I would say it's cutting it close.
Yeah, I'd say that's true.
So yeah, and Way of the Dragon, for the record, is notably written and directed by Bruce Lee. So that'll be an interesting thing to see. And also, the second listed star for Way of the Dragon is Chuck Norris. So We'll
so what the ending is going to result in no victor and no loser. They are equally matched.
That's assuming he's the villain, which it may be. I don't know.
That's fair. I'd assume they would fight each other at some point, in which point it just has to come to a standstill.
Yeah. Apparently it's set in Rome. That's interesting.
All right. I didn't know Rome was known for its dragons, but all right.
I wonder what the prominent languages are in this then, if it's set in Italy.
It says languages, Mandarin, Cantonese, and English on Wikipedia. So I don't, maybe it's available in all three. Maybe parts of it are in Mandarin, whereas other parts are in English.
I'm wondering if when he's communicating with Italians, if they switch to English as like the shared language.
Well, in my version of this movie, the one we just did, whenever the Russian spoke, he spoke in English. So
really? Okay.
They did switch the language occasionally.
All right, okay, that's interesting. I'll be curious to see how they handle that. Then, okay. Well, that's what's next time. We're doing Way of the Dragon on the show next week. So by all means, let us know what you thought of Fist of Fury in the comments. And of course, if you want to support the show and everything else we do, like the Sci-Fi Movie Podcast, the Atomic Cinema Experiment, which is also me and David, or Streams After Midnight, the horror movie podcast I did with Tim, you can support all of it over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and get some bonuses for your trouble, including 2 monthly review shows that me and David do. One is the Criterion Cut, where we review movies from the Criterion Collection, and the other is Extra Reels, which is the opposite of that show, where we review some of the worst things ever made and cry in misery and pain.
It's great.
It's a fun time, so go check that out. But that is the show, everyone. So thank you very much for joining us. We do appreciate it. Keep watching movies, and just like some of the Japanese characters seem to have in this movie, if you can get it, it's always nice to have diplomatic immunity.